So if you're looking to upgrade your career, get a better salary, you should probably skip this video because that's not what I'm going to discuss. अगर लग रहा हो कि जॉब से परेशान हो तो जाके रणवीर अलाहाबादिया का शो देख लो. But today is more about the privileged take on my education from Delhi, middle class, upper middle class mentality, then the comfortable career, 1.5 lakh रुपए की salary, उसके बाद why do I not want to do it, and therefore I have two people on the panel. One, we have Parv, pretty much in the field for the last 7 years.
A little more than that, yeah.
And you've been working in the social sciences subject for the longest time, I remember. Yeah. So hi. And then we have Klimzo, a teacher by profession. She's been teaching since 2020, and she's also been dealing with social sciences. Now, while I had a different question in mind to begin with, which was more on the lines of practical education versus school education, and it was like कि आज के टाइम पे ऊबर ड्राइवर की सैलरी 30,000-35,000 रुपये प्रॉफिट में जाती है, एंड लॉयर या इंजीनियर या कोई भी हो तो हमें 18,000-20,000 रुपये से ज़्यादा नहीं मिलता है. Shouldn't there be more driver education schools in the country on how to give a better Uber service than a BTech or something like that? But when I realized that both of you come from social sciences in India, and political sciences, history and everything, like where the fuck is all that knowledge going right now? Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, I mean, we should definitely talk about the topic that you've raised. But I mean, if I talk a little bit about my career, I've worked not just in social sciences, but also in a variety of non-STEM subjects. So math and science, I know very little. I admit that very honestly. But I've worked in some corporate training, a little bit of K-12, a little bit of post-K-12. So we definitely can talk about that. I think the way to look at the Indian education ecosystem is to think of it as K-12 and post-K-12. So there's this kindergarten to 12th grade that happens, and then there's everything that happens beyond that. Social sciences, I mean, I'm sure Klimzo will speak a lot more in depth about it as well. But quite frankly, I think it's one of those subjects, if I just touch upon it at the starting, it's one of those subjects that you don't really see as much, but I think you feel a lot more than you can possibly imagine. I think it's like one of those things that builds the foundation of each and everything, so many things that we are about, that we go on about, that we talk about, even education, right? Like, I mean, you can't really talk about the modern day education system without really talking about the Industrial Revolution, how that shaped the education system.
I don't want to get into the history because it's somewhat overdone. Ki there's a great deal of practical versus education. The teachers are not paid sufficiently. There are vacancies. The course curriculum, because it's like overdone hai. The take that I want to take is that I don't give a shit like गाँव में स्कूल में एक टीचर है या 50. From a purely selfish point of view, I care about my metric of how I will be judged and therefore remunerated on that behalf, either by a business or by a job or wherever I want to go. Like, there are different ways one can go with their career, but if that is the metric I'm taking, I'm way better doing something that is, on the ground than, like, I know it's been said ki those who can't, they teach, and there's another angle you look at it which says that if you're teaching and you're not really applying it, then it's waste. But like now in the age of, like, with all that tech development, when you have literally every last bit of information on your fingertip with the ChatGPT chatbot, is there really even a need to like now have schools, have educations? Like, people who aren't homeschooling, according to me, I have found them to be stupid now. Like, you can achieve so much provided like you can have the discipline.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah. So as you said that whether there is really a need for school education for the society, for each individual, I feel that currently, if we look into India's scenario, we are we were in a transitional phase few years ago, like a year ago we can say, but right now we are on the other side of transitional phase, but we haven't reached there because of the COVID thing, right? So yes,
This transition you're saying like from offline to online to back to offline.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So first we were doing completely online during the COVID era. That was also first phase of the transition, and then after that we had to again come back to offline. That phase we can say that India as a whole, I think, education industry face a lot of problem, and for children first of all priority, and for the parents as well as for the school institution management, teachers and everything. But again now as the years went by, I think we have come to that, but any other emergency situation might arise, again we might fall apart. Okay, and this is the education industry for both online and offline also. Okay, because a lot of online, like the EdTech and everything came up a lot. Even before I started working also during that phase, few EdTech companies approached me because I was teaching online back then for a few online platforms and different students from around the country. But when I tried myself, there was a lot of difficulty with me, even though I'm quite young for being doing technological stuff, but I couldn't do it, and that's why I chose to teach in a school.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about it. I couldn't do it. I was interviewed. I was then when he came out and told me what I would have to go through, I was like, oh, this I can't, because I am more into being around with the kids physically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you find that more rewarding personally than.
Yeah, it is more rewarding.
So that is actually something that I was coming to, that there is constant criticism कि Indian education system में सोचने की शक्ति नहीं है और criticism के लिए कोई room नहीं है, and questioning power कोई भी अगर बच्चा करता है तो teachers find it better to shun them down. And while I'm sure that you don't do that with your students, and you probably have a slightly more advanced level of teaching in comparison to
Currently now,
attending to queries by your students.
Now, for how the NEP also wants the education system to be, is teachers are more like facilitator. We're just there.
But there's always this, constant fight to not fail.
Constant fight to?
Not fail.
Yeah.
I think we might just be talking about like a bunch of different things all meshed up. And yeah, I mean, sure, the system is that, but let's just try to break it down, right? If you think about it, one primary concern that you're talking about is that what you mentioned, right, in a smaller city, there aren't many schools or there are very few teachers for students. If you look at the data, that's not very true, honestly. It was true at one point of time, but the government, I will definitely agree, that has been doing a great job. If you look at the NCF, the National Curriculum Framework that's just come out, the number of schools and the teacher to pupil ratio has steadily been going up. Our net attendance ratio, gross enrollment ratio is all going up. Literacy rate is definitely going up. I think what you'll find is that there's different places where the numbers start waning. So primary enrollment, primary attendance is really good, but secondary is not so good. And then tertiary is even worse. And then if you go to post K-12, that's abysmal. There's I think 27% enrollment or something like that, which is a very low number. At a primary, I think it's up more than 90% enrollment. And even the gender ratio is more or less equal now. There seems to be gender parity. The number of males and females enrolled in primary school seems to be more or less equal. So, in terms of access of schools, it seems to be going up. There's no doubt about it. The government's been doing a good job of it.
Is access to schools changing the scenario? I mean, considering the fact that Delhi is in a better position to judge whether कोई स्कूल में क्या वैल्यू मिल रही है in comparison to, let's say, something in Bihar.
Yeah.
And mentality shift comes that we are all driven by the metric of money. We are all driven by the metric of our happiness and running away from all the things that make us feel lonely.
I think that's where what I was saying about social sciences really come into play, right? What is the ethics, what are the values, what is the philosophy that you as an individual believe in or espouse, and how you go about living in the world. Uh, if you talk about regional wise differences, I don't know if that's necessarily true, right? Like you said, Delhi has a certain way, Bihar is a certain way. Sure, that might be true, but look at the number of engineering colleges where people from Bihar actually get in. Right, like Super 30 was the Bihar phenomenon. You have a lot of other post K-12 colleges, and I'm talking about engineering and medical colleges and law schools that are filled with great and very smart people from all over the country, right? So I don't know if the regional disparity is necessarily the case, but what you're talking about, the difference really kicks in because of the board systems. So what you have is in India, you have a bunch of different boards. You have the CBSE, which is central board. You have ICSE, which is again a pan-India board, and it's there in fewer schools. CBSE is super popular, ICSE is super popular. But CBSE being a central board, being very prevalent, the number of students that go to CBSE school cumulative is still a lot lesser than the number. It's actually a lot lesser than the number of students that go to state board schools. So the difference that happens in the quality of teaching more stems more from the state board perspective, and I think the NEP does try to address that.
You're saying that CBSE board schools following the CBSE board don't have that kind of problem.
Yeah, so what you're studying in a CBSE school in Delhi is the same thing that you're studying in a CBSE school in Bangalore, is the same thing that you're studying in a CBSE board school in Gaya.
But that's uniformity.
Yeah, that's uniformity. I'm saying that, but the Bihar state board would teach something very different from Maharashtra state board, would teach very different from something from a Kerala state board.
But even then, like now that like you have come from that whole process of school, college, and then working, and then knowing a couple of things about how the world works. Even like the curriculum of CBSE has a major problem. Like all my memories of school with regard to why like I want to run away from loneliness, I don't have a single memory of school ki वो टीचर ने ये पढ़ाया था. It's more like अच्छा हाँ उससे लड़ाई हुई थी, that was the thing, and like the common joke is like at the age of 16 the teacher tells you to find X. And at the age of 30, you're actually finding X. So that's the movie.
I think it's slightly more complex than that, right? I think if you look at the curriculum, the Indian curriculums, especially the CBSE one, I come from that. I know that you come from that. Like all of us are involved with the CBSE board in some way or the other. The curriculum, if you look at it in its entirety, is pretty good. Like they do teach you a lot to equip yourself with the world. I think the criticism that's been there for the CBSE board of late has been that it teaches too much, not too less, but too much. So so that's what the NEPs try to do. It's try to actually cut down on the curriculum. Even during COVID, the government said we'll chop a lot of syllabus from the text. We try to teach great things in school, right? Like, there's no doubt about it. I think the problem happens in the how we're teaching it. And I think what the other thing that you're talking about, right? I don't remember a teacher who's done that or made me feel something great. So I think that's the challenge that we try to solve with technology a little bit.
That is what I think currently the NEP is forcing every schools to achieve that, be it CBSE or state boards or everything. I think first of all, when you talk about regional disparity, they have asked them to include more regional based languages. Now as a teacher, we have always been asked by our institution to
to speak in Hindi.
Yeah, not only in Hindi. If I'm telling a story about suppose just national movement, just for instance, so I will not only talk about the major events that happen around in the northern western part of India. I can always, and they would always prefer, because that even kids also know, we have been hearing it for long. So, but if you have certain stories from the east, during that time, what maybe the tea planters were doing there, or maybe what were the tribal society doing during that time, because they were not involved in this movement and all, but how were they doing it? So even if the textbook, it takes a lot of time to bring changes though, to actually change a book, but they have asked us to incorporate those things in our
You both of you are like really defending like the content that is.
I got into the field thinking what you're thinking actually, but now that I'm sitting here making content for K-12 ecosystem, right? And I've worked on somewhere from third grade all the way till 12th grade. So I have a fair understanding of what the entirety of the K-12 system is catering to. I was surprised that there's so many great things that now we go on YouTube and try to search for. That's already there in the textbook, but we don't remember it from school. So the problem isn't necessarily that the textbook doesn't cover it. The problem is that we don't really remember studying it. And so the question isn't, or the problem isn't the what that's being taught. It's more in the how perhaps, right? And what Klimzo was talking about, that it's hard to bring in that change. And to give you a point of, to put things into context, right? If the government wants to change something or bring about a change like NEP, it was announced in 2020, it's 2023, we're still trying to get changes implemented. At some point, you can't even blame a lot of things because there's about 20-25 crore students in India. 20-25 crore students, that's a lot of people that need to be reached to bring about change. A lot of them come from not so affluent families. Like Tier 1 India is not the biggest portion of the population. In fact, the Tier 2, 3, 4 India is where actually a lot of India lies. Absolutely. Where the changes need to reach.
Absolutely. In fact, when she was saying regional language mein padhana chahiye, it reminded me of a tuition teacher I had back in 8th or 9th. Like, it wasn't a tuition teacher, but like, wo hota na colony mein ek bhaiya hai. So he taught me French Revolution in the most colorful manner possible. Like, वो फ्रेंच आदमी आए थे, वो भोसड़ी वाले 1789 में बैस्टिल स्टॉर्म करने चले गए. बैस्टिल साला जेल, वहाँ पे सब कैदी को पकड़ रखा था. एंड दैट लाइन इज लाइक देयर इन माय ब्रेन आज तक.
That's what we call in our method, storytelling method. While telling the story, that's how you remember.
But I don't remember anything else from the history textbook from 7th, 8th, 9th or 10th.
Yeah, but I mean, so I'll give you the same example. I'll talk about French Revolution only. We're also trying to teach French Revolution. We're making video content for that, right? This is grade 9, it's the first chapter of history. We made videos and we sent it to school, and we showed a lot of people what the dressing style was for people. There's very few photos in the textbook that you'll get, but if you're making a video, you have the liberty to show a lot of things. So the product that I'm working on right now is a grade 6 to 10 social studies video content. So we're basically going through the CBSE textbooks, making scripts and going through a lot of checks, figuring out what extra content needs to be added, shooting those videos and doing a lot of post-production. So these are animated multimedia videos. The startup that I'm working for is backed by a huge school conglomerate. So we also have the liberty of going to different schools and talking to students. And then when we show them those videos, right, we showed it to a couple of students. I've shown it to about 1,000 plus students. And everybody, once you show them the photos and the videos and they're able to place, this is what it looked like. The recall value is just so much better. And they're really interesting concepts. Like, we have so much right. Like, you have a right to vote somewhere because the French Revolution happened in some way or the other. So it holds great value in the world of today, and they're able to make those links because you're able to see a lot of things. You're a lot more immersed. So it's important content. We've seen changes happening by showing different ways of teaching. If you improve the how, the what definitely improves. So there are lines that people will remember. So there's another chapter in grade 10 of history, which is talk about nationalism in India. So it talks about how in Europe you have Germany, France. They were all united on the basis of they all spoke the same language and had some common characteristics. That's not true for India. That's not true for India's freedom struggle either, right? And so we're able to say that India is a rich and diverse country, and we're able to repeat that line through and through. Yeah. And it stuck with students, right? It stuck with me. Like, I, in so many moments, just think about that. India is a vast and diverse country. And that needs a different approach also. So you're able to drill down things a lot better by showing them. The visual recall definitely works. Like, think about it. Our student, like, we are hooked onto our cell phones all the time now. We are always looking at reels. I mean, I barely leave my phone, right? We're always consuming video content. This is a podcast where we're supposed to be talking, but we're recording it on video. So, and then we're so hooked onto video that you have to give students also that. And that definitely makes a huge difference.
Translating the educational content in an entertaining manner is something that I'm I've seen a lot of EdTech firms also now go on. Uh, but I've not really been able to satisfy myself with the translation and the amount of shit that gets lost in it.
While watching a video.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the reason. Like, you need a classroom for that. While because digital literacy is like promoted everywhere. That's why it's not when we used to go to school. It's different now. Kids have big TVs and everything, and like he said, the videos. So we curate those videos for them. We watch, but what a difference we make is that 40 minutes class में आप 30 minutes दिखाते हो. You will show them, and after that I'm gonna ask you things.
Questions.
So now they're watching also.
But what about like doing those things?
Doing those things?
Like if it's a science thing, then doing that experiment.
Something
if
we call it competency-based learning.
Yeah.
We call, so the teacher teach them, but nowadays teacher are using toys, going to playground to show. So even if in classroom kids are a lot of parents also have an issue with this thing that every day my kid is asked to get so many materials for every day. How is there an activity? But we need hands-on activity to show them what is going on, suppose in a science subject also. So
and I think to add to that, right, like simulations are also something that you can do in a tech environment. That definitely helps a lot. That you have you can have a simulation where you can change around some chemical elements and see what sort of reaction happens.
Yes.
So you're in the safe confines of literally doing something on your phone, but you're able to see step by step what happens if I add magnesium to copper or something else, right? Like what color changes happen instead of just memorizing it. You're able to do it through and through.
But तेरे को लगता है कि वो जो safe environment का फंडा है, we tend to latch on to it for the longest time. And therefore, like creatively being able to push yourself is something जो नहीं होता, because at the end of the day we are again trying to secure ends. Like I am at the age of 29 right now. I already have a fail-safe mechanism for the next 5 years. कि कहानी नहीं बनेगी तो I have a LLM that is to specialize in the field of NDPS and policy. Then I have a PhD that I want to go for. And then by the end, like it's 7-8 years, I know that I'll land at one of the good drugs pharmaceutical companies centered somewhere around Netherlands. So, and I hate this about it. Ki I have done so much. Like I've literally gone from school to engineering to Air Force to law to trying like pretty much everything. And then after that, like a venture after venture after venture after venture. And as of today, I have the ability to make money. I am making money. And none of that comes from the education I did, but all of it comes from the things that I was actually practically applying to daily life without that security in my head.
But like, I mean, but I think we're conflating 2 or 3 very different things again here. The ability to make money is, yes, definitely something that the education system will teach you, but before that, right, that safe environment, wala bit, sure, you'll have a plan of action of this is how I want to get to where I want to get to. A lot of people would, a lot of people won't have a plan of action, right? Like I've had in phases of my life where I have a plan of action. I've had phases where I don't have a plan of action. But that safe environment, when it comes to something like, I mean, there's 2 aspects, not just when simulations, right? If we're coming back to that point, it's not just a safe environment. It's also about access. Not everybody will have access to a computer lab. But you will have access to a smartphone thanks to cheap internet that the country's been offering and Android, right? Like most people have access to a smartphone and internet in India. About 500 million people in India have access to a smartphone. Actually, a lot more than that, right? So what ends up happening is that you're able to try out a lot of different things, and that's important. When it comes to the plan in life and how to make money using education, I completely agree with you. I do think that there's a lot more that we should be doing in that regard. And I think, so when it comes to the curriculum, right, like it's not me defending it. I do think it teaches a lot of academic things really well. I don't think there's a lot of non-academic things that are being taught in the textbook yet.
So there, it's sort of widening the gap between the millennial sapna ki ab 35 की उम्र तक need that house, need that car, need that wife, need that husband, need that son, and that social circle, a golf game on Sunday and things like that. And उसकी तरफ इमोशंस रखते हुए भी एफर्ट ना डाल पाना इज समथिंग दैट आई सी एवरीबडी स्ट्रगलिंग विद. कि सपने तो बहुत बड़े देख लिए, उसके बाद वो करने का पूरा इमोशन भी है. उसके बाद they even wake up with that intention in the morning and they even have the ability. The only thing that stops them is their that their safety nets that they build. कि मेरा एक काम मेरा महीने का इतना आ जाए तो मेरे को एफर्ट डालने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. And then like that dream will never come true.
I think more than safety net definitely is a thing, but there's not much that from a school ecosystem that you can necessarily do about a safety net. There's a lot of people coming with different circumstances that we need to consider. But I think what I do feel schools should be teaching a lot more is how do you take risks? How do you take calculated risks better? How do you go about and let's say, how do you experiment with the things? How do you find your way around? Like in Indian curriculum, even in the post-K-12 scenarios, there's very little research orientation. So how often, like Klimzo does this with her school is what she's saying, right? In her class, she goes and tells students, please research about this. But I don't know how many teachers would actually end up doing that and how many of them would have the capacity to do it because there is a lot to teach. So there's definitely a balance to be found.
नहीं कर रहे थे अपना तो टाइम खराब कर ही रहे हो, साथ में बच्चों का भी खराब कर रहे हो. एक मतलब 30 ढीम बच्चे रेस करोगे तुम 12वीं तक, वो बच्चे जीवन में कभी तुम्हारी पढ़ाई की बात को ध्यान नहीं दे पाएंगे. And then on top of that, they will pretty much be talking about schools and teachers the way I do right now. Like,
yeah, I mean that's the world you to avoid.
I've had the most pathetic experiences in school with regard to how I was taught. Like I don't remember 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th कि मैंने क्या पढ़ा है. All I remember is मैंने लड़ाइयाँ करी हैं, मैंने experiments करे हैं दबा के, and I was pretty much just the places where I had interesting teachers. Like I had a very interesting maths teacher. बढ़िया पढ़ाता था, मारता था, फुट्टे से मारता था. And his class used to be the most entertaining class. And I got so good at maths, I was getting 100 out of 100. And sure, when the teacher went away, that interest went away.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so I think even I have realized it in, I think last year, like how you lost interest, like, after your teacher left. It is very important, especially it starts from kids of class 6 and 7. Like for instance, I made the habit, for instance, I took leave for 4 days. Okay, I was teaching a class 6 students and I took leave. And the day I came back, one of them asked me, where were you? And the question was not out of respect. Nowadays kids are upfront. Where were you? Okay, and I was like, I was on leave. No, you didn't come for 4 days. So now I made the habit that I will be on leave from tomorrow. Okay, I tell as in, being accountable. And on that day, you can bring those things and you can do that. Or maybe I'll ask the substitute teacher to take you for games. Then they are prepared. So it's very important because it impacts on their interest in your subject, which I really don't want. So keeping them on track, even class 9 students,
I can only assume.
I think you could never question your teacher, right? Why was he gone? Like,
I don't remember, man. मेरा school का experience, college का experience was the most extraordinary I've ever had. Like I've had teachers who've lost their voice because like they were shouting on me for like 15 minutes at length.
Your teacher?
I had a teacher in college. She lost her voice for 3 days क्योंकि वो मुझ पे इतना चिल्ला रही थी.
I experienced this last month. There was this boy. I was screaming at him so loudly.
वो teacher बेवकूफ थी. Like legit वो बेवकूफ थी. She tried everything to get me rusticated. And she even later on I got to know that she was telling everybody that like I was trying to like ogle at her and like do things to her, pass off comments, but sure, like I look at it very seriously because like I have taken like 5-6 students till date in like whatever I've done, like law, etc. And these people are doing amazingly well, like they're at the topmost places wherever they can imagine. And I credit that to only one and only thing, that I have taken that job so seriously that teaching is not really like, I ensured that even studying was a job for them and as much as teaching was for me. And at the same point of time, like हमारी solid ऐसे 12-15 घंटे बात करनी पड़ती थी.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is more of an apprenticeship, right? So you
Yes.
got people on who are working very closely with you, and that apprenticeship for some work that you're trying to do, any professional job, definitely helps and works really well, right? And in fact, any job that you end up doing, people that are working very closely with an experienced person,
Yes,
that
sir.
will help a lot.
You end up having friends over there, you end up having relationships
हाँ.
over there. Yeah, absolutely.
But matlab, if you're saying that teachers were X, Y, like, I think it's very easy for us to sit here and just shit on teachers and say they're not doing a good enough job. But we have to also I think people have been just saying something or the other about teachers for
They need somebody to blame.
for 2-3 decades. People have just been saying this, or at least though for 20 years to मैं ही सुन रहा हूँ. But I'm saying that that can't be it, right? Like we've gone through multiple different phases of the world, and still we're hearing the same thing. I think if you think about it, what makes a person good at their job, that is what we need to think about. So what I've observed working with a lot of teachers, most of them want just a few things. First is they've gotten into it because they genuinely have a passion to teach students. Most of them actually do, because they do care about working with young people or imparting knowledge. A little bit of that. I think some respect goes a long way, right? Like, if you're sitting here again saying that
Absolutely.
teachers not good.
Absolutely.
But like giving teachers the right respect, you'll get it back also, and they'll show that in the work.
But
then the other thing would be how well are the teachers paid, right? Like, how much work do they have to cover in how much time, how much freedom do they have to experiment? So, like, the curriculum right now is super rigid. The thing is, if they don't teach you that this happened in France in 1789, you won't really perhaps pass the exam, and that's what they're gauged on. But more than that, that's what you're also gauged on. And they have that responsibility to make sure that...
My point was about that it isn't actually how you teach, but it's about how stimulated you are, like, at the time, like, you are consuming that information. Na? Teacher कहाँ पे किस setting में तुम्हें बता रहा है. And ऐसे practical lessons have stuck with me, and अब दूसरों से भी मैंने बात करी तो it stuck with them as well. तो जब वो हुआ तो it definitely worked out better for me. Like, right now I have been editing videos, and irrespective of like how many n number of YouTube videos I've consumed about editing, from the filmmakers to cameras to everything, none of it is because कि मैंने वो videos देखी हैं. All of it has been because I failed successively every hour of the day at something or the other, again and again and again and again.
So that's a great point. I think that's where how a lot of learning actually happens, especially skill based learning. That's how it ends up happening, right? Like, you try to add a layer onto a layer while editing a video, and you fail on that. Then you figure out, how do I add a new layer in After Effects? You learn that, and then when you go and try to do it, it works. That's where a schema is formed in your brain, right? You say that, oh, I've learned how to add a layer in After Effects, because you failed, figured out the answer, and then you got it. And I think that's the role of a teacher. The teacher doesn't have to be a physical person, right? It could be online, like ChatGPT is a teacher, Google is a teacher, any other person randomly that you ask, oh Anshul, yaar, I'm trying to edit a video, bata de ye kaise hota hai. That person's a teacher for you, right? Like, it's not the designation of that person. So मैं कह रहा हूँ, when you try something, fail at it, and then you figure out the answer, and then you get into then you try it and succeed, that's where you learn. Like, that's where learning really happens.
Yes.
But that's very true for a lot of things that you have to do. It will apply to most things, but it won't apply to a few things also. But still, it's important to know a lot of those things. If you talk about, let's say, something like, again, if I come back to social sciences, you're trying to figure out how a bill becomes a law. There's not much of doing there. Like, it is something that you'll have to read and learn and understand. But well, how do you figure out, like, you to understand how a bill becomes a law? अब उसमें कुछ कर नहीं सकते हो आप. Like, there's no doing that can necessarily happen.
Okay.
That can be facilitated. Sure, we could make a
To
simulation.
make the subject understand.
Yeah.
No, I think there are ways.
No, but like there's no doing aspect there, right? You can't really go and present a bill in the parliament.
No, they can do
yeah,
an act play. They do that.
Yeah. There are private member bills and all those things. Like there are things like
No,
that.
I'm saying that you teach just generally how to, in 7th grade you're teaching how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah.
Would you?
So they act it out.
Yeah, they act it out. But to act
Either
it
they
out
act it out,
also.
they actually just go ahead and like take on the humongous task of making a bill and presenting it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying that again, right? Like it's sure there's a practical implication to that, but then how much of it can you really do? Or think about how the constitution was formed. That's also important for us to know. What is contained in the constitution. ये ज़रूरी है हमारे लिए जानने के लिए. But कैसे? There's no doing aspect of
There
it.
is a doing aspect.
The activity can be done.
Activity.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that is hands-on learning, and I think through that they learn. Suppose it was painstakingly done, the whole process of making the constitution, right, for years, and how much people, how much drafting and changes was included. So for instance, we sometimes ask the kids, take a 1 week preparation. You will design a constitution for the classroom, for different levels. If you're doing it for class 12, make it tougher. For 6, 7, you just make it, and then give them 1 hour to do this whole thing, and later ask them feedbacks. Then they'll come up with things like, she was not agreeing to me what I was about to add, and we had to make a lot of changes last moment. So I think in that way we are completely understanding the whole process of making constitution.
Yeah, but like we are understanding the process of making a constitution, but we're not understanding what the constitution makers went through necessarily. We'll still have to read and get a second person's opinion about it, or it won't be the actual understanding of how it happened.
Well, I suggest extreme measures ki let them go through the.
मतलब हाँ, but कितनी चीज़ों के लिए कर लोगे? Then you're restricting yourself to really understand how much of the how many things happen in the world, right? Like plants producing food, like how they use chlorophyll to produce food. There's no doing that you can do. You can sure do biological experiments, but you can't do that for a plant. So the point I was getting at here, right, is that when you're editing a video, you're editing a video. When a plant is making food, a plant is making food. You can understand it from their perspective, what happens in the plants, the process of food making for a plant. But the way of you editing a video is different. So I think that distinction needs to be done when the curriculum.
The observation, your first-hand observation of things will definitely change the way how
but if you
knowledge
don't
is
know what a
retained.
leaf is, if you don't know what a stomata is, how would you observe it also?
I'm sure it can be broken
But
down
class
simply.
wise ही
मतलब हाँ, but I'm saying that at some point when a new concept is being introduced, especially historical or an observed phenomena is being introduced, you will need some level of base knowledge. And I think that's important, that you say this is the level of base knowledge that we're operating from, and beyond that is where you apply.
No, why?
Just say
You keep a plant in the house, you keep a plant outside.
yeah, but what is
Yeah.
You get to know
figure out where the value is being added, no? Where do you add the most value for a student? Because you still have those 16 years of schooling only, right? Or 15 years of schooling that you'll get. I'm talking like entirety of K-12 and post K-12 that a student will typically go through. If you start doing this for everything, you might just extend it 2x it or 3x it. For something that, I mean, how often do you actually end up going and observing a plant? So you need that base knowledge, and that's where the 11th, 12th...
I have a big problem with that, because from 3rd standard till 6th standard, there was this one question that really irritated me. There was, अपने ब्लड में आयरन डालने के लिए क्या खाते हो? एंड आई यूज्ड टू राइट द मोस्ट वियर्ड आंसर, लाइक आई ईट कीले खाऊंगा मैं वो करूँगा. एंड आई एक्चुअली वेंट ऑन टू लाइक राइट दीज थिंग्स इन माय एग्जाम, एंड एवरी टाइम लाइक माय मॉम और एनीबडी विल लाइक दिल इरिटेट द फक आउट ऑफ मी कि ये क्या है क्या नहीं है. एंड लाइक आई आइडेंटिफाई द पैटर्न नाउ, लाइक 9 and 10-year-olds are like way more stimulated in their heads, like their level of stimulation in the brain is like way more than what ours was.
That's a change that's happening. If you think about it, till now the structure, right? Like if you look at the schooling structure right now, it's actually divided into 3 categories essentially. There's K5, K10 and K12. K5 is the first 5 or 7 years of schooling that you have, kindergarten to 5th grade. Then you have K 5 to 10, that is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you have 11, 12. At each of these markers, the curriculum drastically changes. So your experience going from 5th grade to 6th grade is drastically different. New subjects are introduced, moral science, etc. हट जाता है, EVS हट जाता है, you get social studies really kicks in, science really kicks in, and science also, physics, chemistry, bio kicks in. And then once you have a certain level of base knowledge on 6 to 10, that is where 11, 12 mein you go and say you choose, I'll take medical, non-medical, I'll take commerce, or I'll take humanities, and where you basically build on your interest. But
yeah, for I think for an NEP they have.
Yeah, the NEP is, I was just coming to that. So NEP is
it's
changing
changed
that.
now.
What is NEP doing?
Now they have changed into like how he has explained the 3 layers, like so now they have divided into 4 parts now, right? So like preschool, they have the preschool era, which will be from I think till 3 years of age, and then after that you have 1 to 3, then you have 3 to 5, and 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, so
9
it
to
was
12.
basically every 3 years there's a switch.
Yes,
that's happening.
changes.
वो चला जाएगा.
And what you're gonna put inside those kids of that age has also been divided properly, how much they're gonna knowledge.
मतलब सिखा रहे थोड़ा entrepreneurship, थोड़ा coding
Yeah.
आ गया, so we're trying to teach like new ways of working in the world. That is being covered a little bit, and that changes are happening. But the point was, this is based on the fact that, like, if you look at a learning theory, right, what would any person who's designing a curriculum assume, or would want, how they would go about it? You would say, for a person to be able to meaningfully do X, they need to know A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, in those A, B, C, D, E, F, G, maybe A, B, C is something that they'll just have to know, and because D, E, F is what's important to really do X. For example, to be a lawyer, you like knowing how to read is a prerequisite.
Yes.
So you would want to teach that, and then based spiral learning hoti hai, where you'd build on that essentially on top of each other. But then for a lawyer, right, the practical knowledge for a lawyer is more about, let's say, arguing in a court. So they can sure come and say that मेरे को रट्टा मार के बताओ कि आर्टिकल 14 में क्या लिखा है. But how much value does that add, as opposed to saying, you know what, this is a case that I'm giving you where a person was discriminated against because of their caste. What laws would you apply here, or how would you argue this case in court? So to be able to practically do that, you're not just knowing the constitution, you're knowing 25 different things, which is knowing how the articles and the constitution is generally structured, sections kaise hote, articles kaise hote. You also know how to argue in a court, what are the ethics of being in a court, what is the etiquettes of being in a court, what is the
That doesn't
way
go
of
for me, but
शायद तो तभी पॉडकास्ट कर रहे हैं. बट आई थिंक दैट वो सबको जानना ज़रूरी है, एंड उसके बाद जो एक्चुअल प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज होती है अप्लाई कर सकते हो. आई थिंक अभी क्या हो रहा है, चेंज क्या हो रहा है, वाई वी आर सो डिसओरिएंटेड एज अपोज टू लेट्स से 60 years back, 70 years back, is because that rate of change is a lot more rapid now. Students
and
know
on top
things a
of
lot.
that, we don't want to specialize.
Elaborate.
Like, we did not have the exposure at the age of 18 or 19 that we want to be a marine biologist specializing in the growth of fungi at the coast of Alaska or something like that. अपना हमारा एज का तो काफी सॉलिड था ना,
डॉक्टर, इंजीनियर, लॉयर.
चौथी पांचवी तक एस्ट्रोनॉट बनना था, उसके बाद बॉलीवुड बनना था, फिर क्रिकेटर वाला फेज आता है, and then after that you go into that bucket wherever you go
कि हाँ जिसमें मार्क्स आ गए उसको पढ़ लेता हूँ. हाँ, मतलब आई थिंक दैट you're touching upon a very important nerve there, where we do need to make students aware of what different things are out there in the world. वो ज़्यादा practical knowledge है नहीं. Like I started my career doing something known as instructional design.
And on top of that, I think that like जो safe space और ये safety nets की वजह से we're sort of raising a bunch of sissies. Like
अब तू रुक जा, तो annotate मत बन.
नहीं,
तू वापस आ.
generally like I meet tabang people who pass out from Chaudhary Charan Singh, and then I meet very highly recommended lawyers coming out from National Law School, Bangalore. Their ability to get a job done is pretty much the same.
I mean,
And on top of that, they might be playing on different fields, including the district court to the Supreme Court to the ICJ. So, somebody who was, on his ass throughout, went to the best coaching centers, got the best marks, cleared LAT, got the top percentile, and then got into NLS, spent the next 5 years in the most competitive environment possible for a lawyer, जहाँ पे every last bit of argument, things like a normal moot court competition were like the biggest things. At the end of the day, when they come and they are required to perform in the real world in front of a judge on the basis of everything that is their own, they stand like shoulder to shoulder. There is perhaps the Chaudhary Charan Singh guy will end up beating the guy because he's seen more.
But there will definitely be those outliers. I think that's a very different. I mean, again, right? Like I think what you're talking about is more about how some institutions are credentialed and and they get a lot of value, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee this success that you'd think. Or the other thing is that you're saying that some institutions are not as reputed, but they also have the ability to produce great students. That is very true. That will always be the case. But I think when you're designing a system for a country as vast and diverse as India, you'll have to look at things from a system perspective. How can you set the right system, right? And I think that's what.
But that is the conversation I was having that day with you. Like how all these people come to Blue Tokai, open their laptops, turn on WhatsApp, and they write long messages and reply to all their WhatsApp messages that day, and they're like, "Aaj bahut kaam ho gaya."
Yeah, but that's a different thing from
your agency to like be in that safe space and continue to restrict yourself, which because of your upbringing, because of the amount of money Papa has made during lifetime, or like how your teachers really ensured that you were the protected kid, etc., is bound to like fail you. And
but I would argue that in fact a person has gone through the entire and I don't come from any school whatsoever, by the way. I'm actually a accountancy dropout, so I have so I'm not talking about this from any bias, right? But I'm saying that any person who's come from, let's say, IIT, IIM, NLS, right? You went through extreme rigorous amounts of hard work.
Yes.
वो 16 घंटे पढ़े दिन में. So I would actually argue that उनका ability to get to actually work for longer periods of time in a much more productive manner would be a lot higher. I don't know. I don't think that Blue Tokai पे कोई बैठ के सिर्फ WhatsApp पे reply करके चला गया is necessarily the same person that we're talking about here.
Yes.
That might just be more a signaling thing,
yeah,
which is a different problem in the world altogether. But I don't know. It's how it attaches to this one.
I see a lot of nonsense, and I see youngsters, getting there. Like now, like the drive is what? The drive is to become viral, than to actually create value for yourself or for anybody. Like, give me 1 million followers, I'd fucking push this table, including both of you, out of this. That's the way like the brain works right now, right? Yeah. I don't want to like have value creation at the end. I'm just giving an example, yeah.
I think what might be the case is that there's 1%, not even 1%, right? 0.5% outliers. And the thing is, you'll always notice the outliers. Think about it, like in your late 20s, thinking if you just have a decent job, if you're making some not so great money but okay average, above average money, हमें लगता है हमारे पास बहुत कम है. Oh no, I just have the iPhone 12, अब तो iPhone 15 आ गया, 16 आ गया. And guess what? You'll also think at 23, Mark Zuckerberg तो billionaire बन गया था. मेरे पास कितना कम पैसा है. But Mark Zuckerberg is one person out of 8 billion. I'm saying that those outliers always stand out. That's what we're thinking, but actually what ends up happening is that
isn't like the ideal situation supposed to be where like everybody is like working that hard and trying to create that kind of value
definitely everywhere. But then that working hard, right, it's everybody working hard is a very different problem from some
it's very different for every individual, I
yeah
guess.
You think some students are meant to just be the small level players in an organization later on in life?
I think the way they have been socialized plays a lot of role, sometimes with very minimum amount of knowledge. a kid can go very much forward because of his social life, his social surroundings, how he interacts,
Yes.
he or she interacts. So, and someone with a lot of knowledge but doesn't know how to put it out there,
Yeah.
how he has been introverted, never talk much to the teachers. So that plays a lot of role. So that makes it whether who makes it till the end, So yeah, there might be, you will see changes. I have never taught a batch that I've seen them from 8 and then I've been seen them pass out college till now, right? I've just started, so maybe to see that those things plays a lot of role. But I talk to my colleagues and all who has been in this industry for like 25 years, 30 years, right?
How is your experience with regard to like veterans of the teaching industry and like
Me?
your probably newfound approaches to how to
Yeah.
deal with students?
So
Do
I
you
think
find them as like
I think it's interesting because when I joined, I thought I'm a patient person, but when I met those kids, it's not like that. So I have learned because they have been in there. Them dealing with 40 students in a day, it's way above than how I deal with the club, the management. How they know, like किससे कितना ज़्यादा बात करना है, which kid, But you don't know. You're still figuring out. But I think with years, you get to know कि whether this kid is genuine or not, you're just being able to figure out. Yeah. So in that way, and other than that, sometimes I do face problems with the kind of approaches that I come up with, and but then we get along, we exchange ideas and all. Big teachers who have been teaching from classroom board to blackboard and textbook, blackboard and textbook, and then now we have to change to this course of digital literacy and how.
Yeah.
So वो changes आता है, then that means sharing, but differences आता है. There are a lot of differences. Not many young, just few of them we get along. So वो changes आता है, the approaches that we choose. What do they prefer and what I do prefer. Like I prefer. So of course the first classes I taught was 9 and 10. So French Revolution was there. Then I think French Revolution was the chapter that I was sure that I'm gonna pursue humanities in class 9.
Oh.
So that changed me. I was like, I was blown away. Like, with equality, liberty, fraternity when it came out, कि ऐसे भी होता है, I was a lot. So when I was teaching, I have learned that a lot myself. But I think my teacher played an important role, how I think she started with the story of the wife of Louis XVI.
Marie Antoinette.
Yeah. So something else. It was not there. The bits and pieces, Marie Antoinette, that's how I interested. So when I taught class 9, I came up with the Netflix show of Marie Antoinette. Obviously, I've cut the bits and pieces. And yeah. And I showed those parts. And then we entered with the burning of the Bastille and stuff. So
Yeah, and we use those hooks.
yeah. So now I'm sure they still remember them.
I think on that, right, like what coming to the different sort of approaches, right, like what she's saying absolutely makes sense, but I think the love of especially something like humanities is actually done by discussing it in the classroom. Like I remember I had a history teacher who when we were talking, I think we were studying about the Mughals or the Delhi Sultanate, and we were talking about how people had to really bow down to the rulers, etc. And we played out that entire role play in the classroom where he made one of the students become a king, and he went and he tried and he's touching, and the teacher basically said, I'll be one of the subjects, and he went and touched his feet and tried to kiss his feet and stuff, and it's just very jarring for us as students, but then that scene stuck with you. Now that's great value to be had in the class, which is something that only a good teacher can do. But do you really need to spend 20 minutes in a 40-minute lecture going through the textbook? Maybe not really. And that's where something like a flipped classroom approach works, where essentially you give students not homework, but you actually give them proactive, let's say, activities to do. So you give them some content, textbook, etc. to go through. Then once they've gone through that, you come to the classroom and just discuss that. So teacher again becomes a lot more of a facilitator, but somebody who tackles the doubts of a student. Because in classroom, if you have 40 students,
The traditional Indian Gurukul system जैसे होता था.
well, actually Gurukul system is a great system.
Great system.
It is that we lost it somewhere thanks to the white man, but maybe we need to bring that back, right? Because that is our very much part of our heritage and our DNA.
That was pretty much question-based learning system only, right?
The Socratic method that the Westerners would call it essentially.
I think what I have missed out also, I have also, from my own personal experience, what I have missed out in school is that sometimes you are scared of the teacher figure, you know, whether you can actually open out your mind or not. So I think I tried it a lot, and I think on Teachers Day I got many good notes that where the kids told me that there is really freedom of speech in the class. You know, they might use languages that might not be appropriate, but I think it's good to allow it.
Yeah.
You know, because then they always think that the ideas are very close, and I think it should be started from a very young age. You know, if even if they're talking about gender equality, I sometimes allow. There are boys in my class from 7 sometimes they just tell, but क्यों चाहिए मैम ऐसे equality, ज़रूरत तो है नहीं, you know. So but then, you know, don't react to that, let them, you know. So I think the space to actually bring their ideas and let them speak, which I don't think we were not that confident to speak out loud about our this thing. So social science is a subject that is very important to make them speak very openly their ideas.
Well, that makes a good point. And moving on, like, I wanted to just ask from like you both, like being stakeholders in the industry, the education industry, कि एक आदमी को education can be obviously manifold, that you can be good at maths, at the same point in time you can be just as good as changing the radiator of a car, or you can be educated about how to, I don't know, in today's world you can be educated about weird things like how to spit as far as possible and make a Guinness World Record and things like that.
That's more learning by doing.
The whole point is करे बिना तो होगा नहीं, and you'll fail a lot of times. In fact, it'll be the most grilling things, and those are the times only जब सीखने को मिलेगा. Otherwise, safe space में तो मेरे को नहीं लगता कि कोई सीख पाता है. What is the purpose कि आप अपने आप को attempt करो? Is that the success? Is that the money? Or is that the ability to be able to do it in a way कि आज तक वो ऐसे हुआ ही नहीं है? But at the end of the day, why should you continuously fail at something?
I didn't quite get the question. You were asking about how
The purpose of education.
the purpose.
Yes.
I think
From the privileged point, like.
Okay.
I think the purpose of education would depend on the society that is educating a person, right? Like present day education ka purpose is definitely coming still from the Industrial Revolution, where the more important thing was that you have a person who's able to sit in a classroom for 8 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, essentially preparing you to be able to run machinery and do work for an extended period of time. And that's what a lot of it does, right? Even if you go to college, what are you saying, right? Ki, I don't know how much I learned. I barely use what I learned in college in my day-to-day life. Now I started using that a little bit, but that's a different relationship, right? But what it tells an employer, for the most part, what it helps you do is you were tasked with you giving certain tasks, and you were able to complete those in time. You gave it that dedication. And that discipline for formation is also important. But in the world of today, I think, and of course knowing a lot of things with respect to how to do certain things. अभी I think professional non-professional courses का थोड़ा distinction होता है. लेकिन professional courses, again, like a doctor needs to know how to go about and do surgery. So you need to learn that in school, and that's what you'll apply. Lawyer similarly needs to learn the doings of a court. An engineer needs to learn
That's
how.
what I think changed a lot in the last 5 years. Like now I don't need to know how, like what is that draft or how to term this better.
So
now my agency is purely कि मेरे को strategy एक अच्छे से बना लेनी है.
यार वही तो आई थिंक आज की दुनिया में हमें बच्चों को काबिलियत सिखाना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, मोर देन just being able to do certain tasks for an extended period of time, उससे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है ये प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट है, इसको सॉल्व करो. तो डिज़ाइन थिंकिंग जैसे एक कॉन्सेप्ट हो गया, वेर यूर गिवन अ प्रॉब्लम एंड यू फाइंड अ सोल्यूशन फ्रॉम इट यूजिंग अ मोर एम्पैथेटिक अप्रोच. ऐसी चीज़ें बहुत ज़्यादा सिखाना क्लासरूम में आवश्यकता है, क्योंकि दैट विल टीच यू हाउ टू बिकम अ केपेबल पर्सन. बिकॉज द प्रॉब्लम्स दैट यू फेस टुडे, लाइक how I know this thing, how do I get this out there in the world, for example, is a problem statement, and you figure out a solution for that. I'll do a video. How to tackle problems is something to be taught in the world of today.
The jobs of tomorrow will be subject matter experts, managers, because like all
probably right, like definitely. But I think what happens, right, is that it's easier to make a conversation, make a podcast. हम 3 लोग मिले, हमने कोऑर्डिनेट करा, व्हाट्सएप पे करके आ गए यहाँ पे कि ठीक है, बैठ के बात कर लेते हैं. किंतु अगर आप 25 करोड़ लोगों के लिए सिस्टम चेंज कर रहे हो, आपको बहुत ज़्यादा सोच के करना पड़ेगा. इट टेक्स टाइम एंड यू कांट जस्ट मेक अ चेंज दैट्स probably not going to last. For example, I don't know, like cryptocurrency for example was all the rage. Yeah, नहीं demonetization, cryptocurrency is all the rage. अगर हम जाके बोलते कि you know what, नहीं हम इकोनॉमिक्स में क्रिप्टो करेंसी के बारे में पूरा सिखाने लग जाएंगे. अगर आप 2020 में ये बोलते, 2023 में जब या 24 में जब तक इम्प्लीमेंटेशन होता, क्रिप्टो करेंसी चल ही नहीं रहा होता. सो इट वुड बिकम ऑब्सोलीट. सो यू वेट फॉर इट टू बिकम अ थिंग एंड देन यू इम्प्लीमेंट दैट इन द स्कूल. Coding's been going on for about 20 years or so. In fact, it's been going on for a lot longer, but it's become all the rage for the past 20 years. And now it's being introduced in schools. Maybe it's a little too late, maybe it's coming later than it should have, maybe it's not. But the thing is that for a school ecosystem, there will always be a lag. It's always a lagging indicator, and that's where something like those plug-and-play courses like YouTube, etc. really
जिन लोगों को करना होता है, they want to like hone their skills, be in a better position, become indispensable to whatever like organization they are working with. वहाँ पे उनको वो सारे skills competition को beat करने के लिए लेने पड़ेंगे. Like let's for example, like we have Ajju on the set, we have Raj on the set. If Raj isn't able to deliver a certain set of things, like मेरे को वो video एक certain format में edited चाहिए within a span of 1 hour, and Raj's capability is 8 hours. If like by the end of 2 months, 3 months, Raj is not able to deliver it within an hour, Raj becomes dispensable, right? And it becomes increasingly challenging because now like 8 hours ka effort has effectively gotten reduced. Like पहले cameras आते थे जो 1-1 minute की recording clip देते थे. Now you have cameras like which will record for 2 hours at length, and like all you have to do is just pretty much load it on the computer and press enter, and like you have the things done.
हाँ, तो मतलब वही आई थिंक हमें नॉट जस्ट बच्चों को बट फॉर ऑलमोस्ट एवरी पर्सन आउट देयर हमें काबिलियत सिखाने की ज़रूरत है.
काबिलियत.
एंड आई थिंक दैट्स व्हाट a lot of study needs to be about, what a lot of education needs to be about. So coming to your OG question, right, like if you ask me what is the purpose of education today, it should be how to make people a lot more capable of finding answers, finding solutions, and figuring things out. And I think that's what for the next 20 years I see as the purpose of education probably is going to be.
The ability to just keep looking for answers.
Yeah, like finding answers and implementing them.
I think I do agree with what you said, how kabiliyat banana hai, right? So I think education is important right now. It's because I think when a child is put into a school on the first day onwards and then till college, I think he or she experiences a lot of things beyond subjects, okay? So, and in this whole process, an individual figures out what he or she might be doing better in life, okay? So, but as a society, everyone plays a huge role in that figuring out of that individual person's future life, you know, the teachers, the family, how the child is interacting on the way to school, coming out of school, you know. So this whole process, what kind of professors you have met, is gonna actually mold you into the person. So the role of the elderly, you know, everyone included who is elderly, older than the child, is to make sure that, you know, the child is being able to, you know, realize the most organic form of himself or herself, you know. Because you might study all the subjects, but you might never end up liking any subject, you know. you might want to really be an influencer only and travel the world, but you just have to make the child believe that and in this process आपको so education जो way structured हो रहा है ना, like including digital literacy or competency based or maybe gardening or swimming, sports and cultural activities, anchoring. I think we are doing that because in this process a child will realize that I am more interested in, but there needs to be a push.
Yeah, he needs to go through that road.
Yeah.
First,
But
I'll
still
figure out
we
maths, physics, chemistry, biology,
Yeah.
history, political sciences.
Psychology.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, I think it manifests, this knowledge manifests in ways that we don't really see every day. जैसे like you studied geometry in school, coordinate geometry तुमने अच्छे से पढ़ा school में, and you understood the concept somewhere in your mind.
Yeah.
You understood the idea of spatial, how the spaces work, and that is primarily why you're able to drive a car really well. Or when you're sitting and editing a video, that's why you're able to figure out After Effects में
the lower thirds and everything.
Yeah, what is going to be the vector of every element that's happening, right? So we don't really realize it क्योंकि हमें theory पढ़ाया था, but somewhere it does form a schema in our mind.
But the problem it lies is that how we are still in that phase, and not only our country, different you have to pursue this to have the maximum amount of salary, and you have to do this only
Maximum
then
amount of salary.
yeah, great, and then you will have this family, you will have this high society and everything. So because of that, in this process a lot of us lose a lot of things in that yeah.
I think the drive for being able to make money, like, and that to not like big money, just like small money, like
That
sometimes
it's
1,000 over there, 5,000 over there, 1 lakh over there. इतना and like it keeps like nicking our brain, like ये आ जाए तो बात बन जाएगी, ये आ जाए तो बात बन जाएगी. And
so I think बहुत like it's a very very important thing that you're talking about. ये बहुत ज़्यादा सही बात बोल रहे हो. I think उसको alleviate करने के लिए जो स्कूल में एक बहुत ज़रूरी चीज़ नहीं सिखाते हैं हम, वो है philosophy. I think we tell you that these were 5-6 philosophers that were there in the world. ये Jean-Jacques Rousseau था, ये Socrates था, ये Plato था. हाँ, ये John Locke
later है ना, वो तो starting में तो कुछ पढ़ाते नहीं.
हाँ, मतलब
no philosophy.
philosophy. So what does it mean?
For the first time I was a fan. I was like, I found my guy.
हाँ, तो मतलब मैं कह रहा हूँ शायद स्कूल में philosophy पढ़ाने से बहुत कुछ फर्क पड़ेगा. Right? Like I discovered, like, I think I had the most I think I changed the most as a person. I grew the most as a person when I discovered philosophy and read certain philosophy, right? Yeah. So I think that's something that we need to expose a lot more in school. And that's what I think the internet is a beautiful thing for, right? I mean, we should definitely make it a lot more structured. We should make learning paths a lot more structured for students. But the internet is this beautiful tool that lets you democratize education. Matlab, democratization of education is something that it's a concept that this gentleman known as Paulo Freire came up with back in I think 1920s or something. He's a Brazilian philosopher and activist and educator, and he came up with he wrote this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. तो उसमें वो कहता है कि हमारा जो सिस्टम ऑफ एजुकेशन है बहुत ज़्यादा बैंकिंग सिस्टम है कि हम ट्राई करते हैं कि डिपॉजिट कर दे बहुत सारा नॉलेज एक दूसरे के दिमाग में, एंड देन समहाउ वो डिपॉजिट रिटर्न देता रहेगा. बट व्हाट वी शुड बी एमिंग लुकिंग एट education is should be in a much more democratic way, where a student is able to choose that I want to study these 5, 10, 20 things. And I do think that the world is moving towards that a lot more as individualism takes over, agency ज़्यादा बढ़ती है. किंतु वो decisions बनाने के लिए भी, like to be able to make those decisions that I want to study X, Y, Z, you should know a lot of things. That I want to study how to build a car. I want to go through some sort of physics to know that, oh, you know what, how motors work is something that I find interesting. अब वो तो तभी मैं कह रहा हूँ कि एक बेस लेवल ऑफ नॉलेज देना ज़रूरी है, विच इज़ वॉट आई थिंक लॉट ऑफ एजुकेटर्स विल टॉक अबाउट. जो NEP का भी 5+3+3+3 टाइप का सिस्टम है.
Online educators have a different take altogether. Like they are now entering that YouTube creator, Instagram creator life altogether. So the focus isn't really like at there. The focus is there to like to be able to make a successful career at the end of the day.
हाँ, बट डिपेंड करता है आप कौन किसके नज़रिए से देख रहे हो. इफ़ यू लुक थिंकिंग ऑफ इट एज द यूट्यूब एजुकेटर, मतलब इफ़ आई एम अ यूट्यूब एजुकेटर एंड आई एम मेकिंग सर्टन यूट्यूब वीडियोज़, माई फोकस इज़ टू मेक a career for myself, of course, while pursuing a noble thing. I'm not shitting on YouTube content creators at all. I love the fact that we have so many good teachers on YouTube. Like I learned a lot from let's say crash course for example, जो जॉन ग्रीन का
Crash Course,
हैंक
Khan
ग्रीन
Academy, all
का,
these-
हाँ, तो इसमें ना बट लर्निंग पाथ्स होते हैं, and those learning paths are important as opposed to just a YouTuber saying, okay, you know what, let's just look at how leaves get their color, or how a suit is stitched, or how you do XYZ, how to code. उससे अच्छा मतलब एक वीडियो इसके बारे में, एक वीडियो इसके बारे में, एक वीडियो इसके बारे में, ऐसे बहुत सारे यूट्यूबर्स हैं जो अपने इंटरेस्ट का टॉपिक लेके बात करेंगे, कि जानते हैं कि ये वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन का मतलब क्या है, एंड यू विल जस्ट टॉक अबाउट दैट. बट समथिंग लाइक अ क्रैश कोर्स और सम ऑफ दोज मोर फोकस्ड यूट्यूब क्रिएटर्स, एडुकेटर्स वुड से ये लर्निंग पाथ है, इसको फॉलो करो. And I think what we need to start doing now or figuring out, which is where I think a lot of machine learning would come into play, is कि आप बता पाओ कि आई एम अ स्टूडेंट एंड मेरे को इन 4 चीज़ों में इंटरेस्ट है, जैसे जैसे करके imagine it as a branching thing, right? I can go into different branches and try to learn a lot more about the
So now
world.
computer will tell you that this is what you should pursue, like for a while.
I mean, I think it's a tool, right? It depends on how you use it. आप बोल सकते हो कि मेरे को 20 चीज़ें जाननी, लाइक आई स्टार्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट हाउ आई वांट टू लर्न हाउ टू बिल्ड अ कार, एंड उससे बात करते करते मेरे को गाड़ी के इंटीरियर में ज़्यादा इंटरेस्ट आता है, गाड़ी के इंटीरियर में मुझे इंटरेस्ट आते आते मैं शायद डिज़ाइन पे पहुंच जाऊंगा, एंड आई स्टडी हाउ देयर इज़ अ सीमलेस टच स्क्रीन इंफोटेनमेंट इन द न्यू फैंसी कार दैट्स देयर, कि इस गाड़ी में ये इंफोटेनमेंट सिस्टम है, इसका डिज़ाइन फिलोसफी क्या है, और मैं करते करते स्टीव जॉब्स की डिज़ाइन फिलोसफी पे आ जाऊँगा. So there's different branches and there's so many linkages in the world.
Yeah.
Education right now has broken a lot of those down.
Yes.
But the connections between different disciplines, right, इसको multidisciplinary बोलते हैं, that needs to be brought out a lot more in a much more active manner. I think it's a lot more implicit right now. हाँ, मतलब organized, yeah, but like I think organization will happen learner to learner. कि आपको जो पढ़ने का मन है, तुमको जो पढ़ने का मन है, मुझे जो पढ़ने का मन है, वो हम individually ढूंढ पाए. That becomes important.
I think future में हमें ऐसे schools देखने को मिलेंगे that this is a शादी का खाना बनाने का learning school. This is a like whatever skills that you see in daily life,
Yeah.
like the way US has plumbing schools and AC repairman schools and all those things, like in their community
Yeah.
colleges and all.
Dude, in fact, like I do think I mean, I think you should also chime in here, but I think a lot of schools in the future are going to be about specific skills.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we
mobile
have
repairing का
currently, like in our school also, we once a week we have these different clubs,
clubs.
and obviously other clubs you must have known, so Western music, Indian music and that. But we have gardening club where monthly the kids actually grow plants and they would
Oh,
give
wow.
the school
Nice.
management with their basket, and they have cooking class, and so there is not only art, so they do have art, and they have modern art and sculpture making, and so the facilities needs to be given for every child. ऐसा नहीं कि सिर्फ swimming, no, there should be water polo as well, so it has वो चीज़ें, now we do it once a week, right? So it should be something regular that the kids can get involved, because I have seen kids, my kids usually are not absent on the day that that happens. They're excited, they are coming with their clothes, those who have to make art, so it's a good thing. So as a skill-based development you were talking about, they have to be involved in those things. There's a protest club also where they
Holy.
learn. Yeah. So that they know. Like, yeah. So it's a good thing in a way. So I think more of that should come up in schools.
I'm curious now, what is the protest club? What do they do?
So maybe I'm not there, so I'm in the chess club. So
Subtle show off.
Yeah. So the instructor will give them a theme. Maybe they research and come back, and they make placards and stuff.
Okay,
And it's a 1 hour class every day. They all the students are in different clubs, so they disperse to their own clubs. So suppose so they roam around the campus, they do their thing.
That's actually super cool, yeah.
That's cool. Like you can protest against the gardening club.
Yeah. So they do a lot of things.
I mean, I hope your students are not watching this, because we don't want to be giving them this idea.
They have baking, they bake, yeah. They
But
come
that's
up-
wonderful.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Like I was starting this conversation with a very depressed state of mind, like क्योंकि मैंने इतनी videos देखी थी education की, problems with the education
What?
system and all, Dhruv Rathi, Think School, then Mohak Mangal, and like all these people have like talked about like problems with the NEB, problems with the Indian education system, lack of critical thinking, etc., etc., etc. And like now I get like, acha, there are efforts being made, there are things being done, like it inspires a certain level of
It
hope.
changed. So, this change is slow,
Yeah.
but I think this is how I have, because you compare yourself from your own school life, right? There's nothing. So like we don't have a lot of access to
Huh.
this kind of activity. I would have loved to be just in gardening, but I never had that, right?
Yeah.
So you are being taught. So it's a good way, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's going to become a lot more important, right? Like I think we'll have a lot more of those, and not just in schools. I think we'll have like higher education, right? Like post K-12 is where I think the most scope for disruption really is there. Abhi dekhoge, I think I saw a recent estimate where I think I saw somewhere about barely 5% of non-professional graduates are employable really. That's an alarming number. Like I think 1 crore के आसपास बच्चे higher education system में घुसते हैं beyond I think engineering etc. My numbers could be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but a very few number are actually employable, and most of the countries actually just like lawyers, engineers, doctors कितने बनते हैं? Most people actually end up doing BBA, BCom, BA. How many of those are employable, right? But they need to be teach employability.
Employability खराब है, मतलब
हाँ, तो उनको वो I think and that employability space is where a lot of work needs to be done.
Yeah.
क्योंकि K-12 में specifically you have a very rigid prescribed curriculum. That ये CBSE ने बोला यही सीखना पड़ेगा क्योंकि बोर्ड आपका इसके basis पे ही हो गए. But higher education works slightly differently, where you've seen that in the past also, where companies have tied up with colleges or just directly set up their own academies and said, we don't have to be a college graduate to really come to us.
Google now.
Google does
did
that.
कि you don't
A lot
need
of
a degree
companies,
now.
right? HCL actually I think set up an academy as well, where they said we'll directly train graduates. By graduate I mean people who graduated from school. So you will give them a 2-3 year of apprenticeship, उनको थोड़ा stipend भी मिलेगा and आप थोड़ा पढ़ाई भी कर, and you'll actually learn a lot of valuable skills needed to become like something like a software engineer. Now those are very important, very good, useful things to have, and I think we'll see a huge rise in those. And I think if you think about it, how many people are there in the world, how many people are there in the country who are not doctors, engineers and lawyers who do need this employability training? हमारे देश में ही करोड़ों में हो गया ऐसे, and there's just so and you go to any good employer, they'll say they don't have enough people. You go to most
probably also because of regulations ना.
मतलब but higher education में आके
दिन
post
में
K-12
8 घंटे 9 घंटे काम करना होता है. अब जैसे राज के साथ में अभी परसों बात हो रही थी, तो we were discussing and राजा सर लंबा नहीं हो जाएगा, तो अब I have changed my thinking entirely, and like you can
but like I mean that's a very different thing from you're talking about more of a company's regulation कि यार आपको इतने घंटे काम करना है, इतना वो करना है. But if you think about it,
for the purpose of your personal growth and your education only.
No, but I'm saying that you could also have situation, and we've seen that rise in gig economy where we say that I have this skill set, I'll work for 5 different projects at a time, and फिर उसके बाद मतलब मैं 6 महीने तक बहुत अच्छे से I'll take on 5-6 clients, work for them, and then for 3 months I'll just travel the world or travel the country or do XYZ things, and then I'll get back into the economy. And ये gig works में करूँगा. And I don't, if I'm doing a contractual gig for any company, they don't have to, like I don't have to work for 8 hours in a day. I can work for 2, I can work for 20, as long as I'm able to get the work done within the stipulated time. And वो आपका agreement होता है company.
But that is more like a work discipline, and what's your objective?
Yeah, so again, right, like those values we need to foster in people, and that's where I think something like a philosophy really kicks in. That's why we should be teaching a lot of ethics and philosophy to school students. And I think that's going to be the major, going to be a very big deciding factor in that. Lekin, as an employer, right, as somebody who employs people, I do, like we have full-time people also work with us regularly, come to, सुबह 10 बजे आते हैं, शाम के 7 बजे जाते हैं, do the entire thing. We also have people who work with us in a freelance capacity. if people are able to get the work done as without coming to office, I won't really mind, right?
Yeah.
मेरा purpose है कि मेरे को
काम मिल
XYZ
गया.
काम खत्म करना है. मेरे को I need to complete this particular work. If I'm able to do that with people within my team, or if I'm able to get that done with somebody who's working as a freelancer somewhere in a different part of the country, why not? Like, I don't think anybody will care.
Yeah.
And I do see a rise in that, a lot more acceptance in that now. And that's where those vocational schools could come in.
Yeah, and that's probably that's probably the area of development in the coming years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, again, right, the enrollment ratio for higher ed is 25, 27, 30%. Like, it's a very low number. So, 70% of youth don't actually end up going to colleges by the looks of it. And this is government data, right?
And even the ones who end up going to college don't end up really having the best.
Yeah,
plans.
so there's definitely a lot of potential to disrupt the higher education space.
The dilution just has to be controlled.
But to do that higher ed really well, you need to have gone through the school, is what I feel.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you need to be able to like put yourself in that knowledge pool. You don't necessarily have to go to a school.
yeah, I mean, school is the easier structured way of doing it.
It's the easiest, convenient, structured way of doing this. But the same thing can be done like outside school, like homeschool or like do something.
But there's a lot of drawbacks with homeschooling also, which I don't
Yeah.
think we talk about. I'm sure you know a lot.
Lack
more
of
about,
social life for starters.
which is a big thing, right? Like,
Emotional development of the child with regard to like.
plus, how much time would you as a parent or guardian be able to give to the student on a daily basis? Do you think that you as a parent really know everything that a student needs to learn?
No,
like,
no.
do you know physics or chemistry as
Absolutely
well as you
no,
know
absolutely
history? Will you be able to give them that breadth? So then somebody else would end up homeschooling. Like, you'll get a tutor to homeschool
Yeah.
your student, and they'll, I'm sure, would teach a lot more than a regular school, or
But
they
that
would
just
go
gives
at the pace.
That just gives me the agency to be able to do all the things that I have plans for without having the bounds ke acha 2 baje tak ye hoga, 4 baje tak ye hoga and all those things.
Definitely, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility advantage there, but I also feel that a lot of those flexibility advantages can be built into the school ecosystem.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
homeschooling's done. Like, there's no schooling that happens for a lot of tier, not the most affluent families in India, and then the affluent families in India is where the homeschooling happens.
Yes.
So, if affluent families are doing it, you can also build that into the private school ecosystem.
Like I said, like I was speaking from a point of privilege.
Yeah.
But before ending, like last question about the EdTech world altogether. Like, where is it going now? Like, we see a decline in the sign-ups, we see a decline in the revenue streams, we see a decline in the number of people actually wanting to study online, but they are more connected to the teachers now. Like, teachers are the one like now having a sway key where like a student will enroll. If he's in this academy, then this academy. If it's in like that academy.
I think that teachers having that charisma and that pull is something that's been very prevalent in the test prep segment. It always has been, and that I think is getting translated into different facets also. But if you think about it, the world is moving a lot more towards a personal brand sort of thing, where you see founders also who have a strong presence on Twitter, now X, right? Like, they have a strong presence on LinkedIn and X, and they're able to pull a lot more people to their product also. And that personal branding just seems to be something that the world is inching towards. I mean, sure, that is definitely there in teaching as well, but definitely plays a lot bigger role in EdTech.
एक YouTube short channel खुल जाता है ना, सुषमा दीदी के किस्से.
हाँ, मतलब वही, so I'm thinking that apart from that, even if if you recognize as somebody who knows a lot about the industry, people would assume that your product would also
be worth it.
A really good one, which could be true, which could not be true, but sure, right? Like, people are able to pull people onto
What
there.
about like, how do you see it playing out? Like, you see a lot of crunch happening. You see.
I do. So I think, I mean, I got into EdTech because I really believe in the idea. Like, I got into educational technology before EdTech was even a term coined, right? Like, this I'm talking 2014 is when I got into this. So I think the world is changed, right? Like, internet's really there. People learn differently, people work differently. It's important to recognize that and really work with that. But at the same time, I think EdTech right now is seeing a slump. It did get a big boost because of COVID, but even if that's, I think it's going to normalize now.
Normalize
I also think a lot of people got into the industry without really wanting to do well. I think a lot of people thought that there's money to be made here, which, sure, true or not, but is not why you should do something like an EdTech.
Yeah, the
So
packages are insane, like 3 crores, like for a teacher.
yeah, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that though. I mean, if a CEO or if a high paid executive makes that much money, a teacher who has the reach of millions should also be able to make that money. I don't think there's anything wrong with that to say that teachers should not be paid well. But I think the problem happens where, in the name of EdTech, just very basic things are done. And I think a lot of the EdTech farces or the problems that are happening in the industry are less to do with the content or the product. They're a lot more to do with the business practices of the companies. And that
I saw a course like day before yesterday by one of the big companies only, how to upload a YouTube video like was legit a course. And I was blown away by the fact because like that information is freely available, and this was a 99 rupee course, like.
Yeah, so I mean that's what. So, but more than that, it's also about how there's a lot of mis-selling that happened. There was a financing structuring problem that
was
some
against
edtechs faced.
Byju's.
Yeah, I mean a lot of edtechs faced a lot of that problem. Like it's not just one company. It just became like an industry thing. And I think those practices need to be weeded out, and they are being taken care of now. So I think it'll take a couple of years to stabilize, but after that I do see a future there, right? Because I don't like looking at us, we're all millennials, right? The three of us are millennials. I don't know how many of us, when we have kids, if we have kids, would actually want our kids to go through life in a non-tech manner that includes education, right? So I do see a potential in future there, and I see merit there where you can, like, you learned how to edit videos online. I think your children should also be able to learn a lot of things online without really having to go to anybody.
Absolutely.
And that is what EdTech, the promise of EdTech is, and we should be optimistic about it. At least I am.
Well, I look forward to like a lot of interesting schools coming up now, and hopefully in the tech space. Before signing off, let's end it on a note where we can like give away, like the people who have heard us for so long, something so ridiculous that we did as students.
Something ridiculous?
Yeah, so when you were a student, like in college or something, what was the most ridiculous thing you did?
Me? I think I was very disciplined in school. I think I was way too scared. I've always been in boarding. So they would always threaten me that your parents will be called. So I was very scared as a child. So I've never done anything like that. But I think for me, even missing a class by just hiding in, on top of the bunk bed, I think there was a lot of ridiculous thing for me during that time. I was very scared, but I used to be doing it with few of my friends. Used to be really scared. But one thing my dad used to tell me while dropping off me to hostel, he used to tell me, now go, if any complaint comes and that comes directly to me, and before that you didn't confess me, then there will be a problem. So I used to confess before they call my parents.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So in that way, I didn't do any as such.
Ridiculous. Let me think.
The most ridiculous.
I mean, I'll have to think. I barely remember school, to be honest.
School or college, like?
I think, to be honest, the most ridiculous thing I've done, I'll talk at a very macro level, was I did not think through what I was going to pursue in terms of studying. I don't think I think I chased money and employability in school rather than chasing something that, I enjoy studying this, or I will enjoy studying this. And I think that wasn't the best decision if I look back at it. Like, it did not get me a lot of happiness, and then that's why I did do a U-turn in my career very early on. Thankfully I realized it
This is a very Nitin Kamath style ruler. Like, I wish I really enjoyed studying back in the day.
I mean, now I love studying so many things now, which
Yeah.
I did not in school. I mean, something like a physics or a chemistry or even biology. Biology I still don't like as much, but we actually sit and talk about a lot of those things so
Yeah.
much, right? In school, I did not. And I think had I had the benefit of internet and YouTube when I was in school, things probably would have been different.
Would have been different, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but never too late to.
So yeah, like bunking classes aside, I think that is the ridiculous thing.
So that's great. I mean, I did get a good conversation out of it. So with that, we'll sign off. I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope this was a conversation worth your time, etc.
Etc.
Thank you for having us,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anshul.
All right.
Cheers.